Hello everyone, this is Mr. Frazier again. Gonna give you a quick tutorial here. I want to remind you before we begin that these are unscripted, and because of that I sound silly and sometimes make mistakes, but that's the fun of it. So today we're going to talk about really quickly the Atacama Desert, which is one of my favorite topics to discuss. The Atacama Desert is found on the west coast of the Andes Mountains and along the Pacific Ocean. It stretches for about 600 miles from Peru's southern border into northern Chile. And it sits, you can think of it kind of in the western hump of South America. Now, the Atacama Desert sits along the ocean, which may be surprising to you because you assume the water from the ocean, you'd have a moist climate. But we just don't have that. In fact, the Atacama Desert we consider an absolute desert. And it's called the absolute desert because it is the driest place on Earth. There's spots there that have never, ever received rain since human beings have been recording it. It's extremely dry, and nothing is naturally living in most of this desert. And this is what makes it unique. Even though it's not the biggest desert in the world, the Atacama Desert is by far the driest. So what makes it so dry is this thing called a rain shadow. The Andes Mountains and the wind patterns coming off both the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean are shadowing out this area of land and creating an inability of water to be dropped there. So let's take a look at what that means. If we look at the desert here, we'll notice that the Andes Mountains stretch along this here. Here's all the Andes, and then the Atacama sits in this area right here. You have the Pacific Ocean here, and then obviously you have the lower lying regions of South America to the east. The rain shadow is easier understood if we look at it from the side. Coming first from the east, we'll talk about the winds with the carrying moisture coming off the Atlantic Ocean, blowing a westerly direction. And there's a few constants we need to know about weather. And one of those is as clouds go higher in altitude, they cool because you become colder as you become further away from Earth's surface. As these clouds cool, they do what's called condensate, and they actually will release their moisture in the form of rain or snow or whatever precipitation the conditions are right for. So coming off of the Atlantic Ocean, these winds pull all that moisture from the continent and from the ocean, and they're very quickly pushed up against the Andes Mountains, which, as we all know from pressure and those kinds of activities, the harder they're pushed, the faster they move. The faster they move, the more moisture is dropped. And so basically what we have is, up until the tip of the mountains, we have most of the moisture being dropped from the on the eastern side of the continent. If these clouds can make it up over the Andes Mountains, they, because of the absence of land, the absence of pressure, will actually begin to drop. But when they drop, the opposite happens from what we discussed earlier. The temperature gets warmer, and these clouds, in effect, stop or cease dropping their moisture. They actually dry up. So no rain will come from the eastern side of these Andes Mountains due to this high pressure from coming over the mountains. So you may look at it and say, well, what about from the west? When we look at it from the west, those few winds which would come from the ocean are unable to pick up moisture. The reason they cannot pick up moisture from the ocean is that the ocean in this region of the world is particularly deep and cold. Because the moisture in the water is so cold, these winds do not pick up the moisture. And therefore they're dry winds. And so even though they are being pushed up here, there's no moisture to drop within those clouds. And so the Atacama Desert is left dry and left without the rainwater that we would need to support life. Just another look there. So that doesn't mean that humans don't want to use this dry region of the earth, because even without life, the desert does serve a purpose. The first one I want to talk about is this thing called saltpeter. Saltpeter is an ingredient in explosives. It's been used for centuries in things like gunpowder, and it's incredibly important to the mining of silver, tin, and copper in the Andes region. So saltpeter is actually taken out of this desert because of the dry conditions. It's plentiful because it doesn't wash away like in other regions. It's easier to find, easier to preserve because there's no water damage. The other reason why people are using the Atacama Desert is observatories. These are the institutions, the buildings which house the massive telescopes which look at the stars and study space. The reason the desert is perfect for this is because there's little light pollution and little actual pollution in the air above this region to, for lack of a better word, mess up the visual of the scientist. So the desert is a perfect place for people like those people at NASA to set up their telescopes and to watch the universe. So people are living in this desert. So how do they live in the Atacama? Well, the first thing they need is water. Water and food have to be trucked in. Now the problem with trucking water in is twofold. The first one is it causes a lot of pollution. That's the exact reason why people are in the Atacama using the resources, and so it puts at danger that. The other problem, besides here, I'll write it down here, besides pollution, is a lack of support resources. So, for example, there's not a gas station if somebody breaks down in the desert. There's not a rest area for these men and women to pull over at. And so it's incredibly difficult and expensive to truck this water in and this food in. So modern science has brought a solution to surviving in the Atacama Desert. And that's what you're going to do next. You're going to watch the video that is below on the website. And I'd like you to watch carefully as you see these people literally bring life to the desert through science. You're going to watch that, and then you're going to answer the two questions that are below. Good luck, and thank you for watching.